Okay, I think we'll make a start and we'll allow other people in as they arrive across to the meeting. So first of all, welcome along everybody, and thank you for joining us at the Healthy Active Children Conference for this session on barriers and solutions to children and families cycling. We're really, really grateful you've given your time, especially there's definitely some familiar names and faces on the call who have done many of these sessions this week. So it's good to see you all again, and thank you for continuing to join us. My name is Josh from Active Oxfordshire, and we're really, really looking forward to this session because we've got some fantastic guests and speakers coming up for you. Just a couple of quick bits of housekeeping. When people are talking, if you wouldn't mind just keeping yourself on mute, just purely because they'll, in case of any background noise, but we will definitely give you space and time to ask questions as well, certainly at the end, or as we go along, if you pop them in the chat function, where I will very quickly write hello, and it should appear on your screen so you know where it is. That will allow you to ask questions as we go along, and I can kind of interject if it kind of is specific to something that's going on at that moment. And just to say, we're recording the session just so that we can pick out all the snippets afterwards as well. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass over to Dr. Alison Hill from Cyclops, who's going to be our host for the afternoon. Alison, over to you.
Hi, thank you, Josh, so much. And it sounds as though it's been a really successful week on the Healthy Active Children conference. And I think this one is going to be the highlight, I'm quite sure. So just to introduce myself, I'm Alison Hill. I'm a public health doctor by background, worked as a director of public health in Milton Keynes and Buckinghamshire for many years, and then latterly worked in Public Health England, which everybody's heard of now and probably hadn't heard of a year ago. And currently I'm chair of Cyclox, the cycle campaign for Oxford, and delighted to be part of this conference, and also to have been working with Active Oxfordshire on the Bikes for Key Workers project over the whole of the pandemic period. And also I chair the National Bikeability Trust, which is the national charity which manages the government grant for bikeability training. So we have three very fine speakers today. Two local to Oxford, and Carolyn Axtell from Waltham Forest, who will be talking about her experience as part of running Joyriders and many other things in London. So what I'm going to suggest is we go straight in to hear Natasha Mighty, who is working as part of the Active Reach project in Blackbird Leys with the Oxford Hub, and is really beginning to mobilise people and get them cycling, and kind of is really kind of front line working with people and understanding the barriers that they have. So Natasha, can I hand over to you?
Yeah, that's fine. Good afternoon, everybody. As Alison said, my name is Natasha Whiteley, and I'm working with Active Reach, part of the Oxford Hub project to get more people inclusive into activities during the COVID lockdown. But I'm also here to speak about my personal experience from living in Blackbird Leys, Greater Leys in Oxford. And I used to do athletics a long time ago, and then I had an injury to my back, which prevented me from running and being more physical. So I was more stuck inside and I wanted something to do. And I got in touch with Emma from Active Hub, and she let me know about a project that Ellie is running, which I'm also involved in, called Ready Set Go, which is to do with getting more people inclusive into cycling in and around Oxford, especially children and families. So I joined up to the project and got more involved on a voluntary basis, and now I work for the organisation. So unable to be able to jog, I did more riding. Like, I got a bike from the company, did more cycling around Oxford because it's less pressure on my my back and my hips. So that's very good for my mental health, and also for my well-being of getting outside, getting fresh air, doing daily activities. So I also got in touch with the lady called Jenny, who works for Wheels for All, and we want to set up a women's 16 plus, age 16 plus, cycling in and around Oxford, just for women who maybe haven't cycle for a long time or would like to cycle for a long time. But Ellie from Oxford Hub is going to talk to you a bit more about the Ready Set Go programme, which is also involved with what I just mentioned with Jenny for Wheels for All. And also I've noticed from cycling, one of the barriers for people in this area of Blackbird Leys and Greater Leys is like some people can't afford a bicycle, just alone for themselves, yet alone for their children and the rest of their family. So that's also where we're trying to help out with giving them refurbished bikes that are safety checked, enabling them to go on the road and do more cycling as a family or individually. So I think that's one of the greatest things that I've enjoyed so far from working with the project, and just for my own personal choice. I enjoy doing that. And also going with Jenny for Wheels for All, I noticed different cycle routes around Oxford and Blackbird Leys and Greater Leys that can take you to different parts safely. I would say the majority of the places around here are pretty reasonable. Just some could do with a bit like cutting down on the edges, like trees and stuff overgrown. So I think that's really, really, really positive. But also we have a large population of like Eastern Timor or non-speaking English people. And I think they're possibly one of the people that I'm trying to reach more, because they're non-English, so they don't understand so much what we're doing. But I have been in touch with a pastor who speaks to people who are like Spanish speaking or Portuguese, and let him know about the cycle project that we're doing at Oxford Hub, and also with Ready Set Go. So I think that's a really good thing to try and reach non-speaking English people. And we also take for granted that sometimes we think everybody can read, and when they can't. So yeah, that's basically what I've been doing. So I'll pass you back to Alison, if anyone's got any questions.
Oh, no? Thank you so much.
I hope I didn't speak too fast.
You spoke perfectly. And just to say, how did you handle, just one question before we move on, how are you managing with the non-English speaking community in Blackbird Leys?
Pictures and hand signals, because even though Blackbird Leys is very large, you've got lots of little pockets of different areas behind. So because obviously with the COVID, people aren't coming out into the community so much, because I would go to the community centre, and there's a chap there who used to run the credit union, Jim, and he speaks so many different languages. So he's a great chap to be on board with, because he knows all the pockets of the different groups of different nationality. And also in the community centre, they would celebrate, like Indonesia. They had a day there where they celebrate different cultures. So me personally, I would like to see all more people with disabilities riding with their families, and also more people of BAME, Black and ethnic minority groups, inclusive in Oxford, cycling around. That made me feel very happy.
I think that would make all the people watching this happy as well. Really feel Oxford is a cycling city, and we want as many people from all ages and all abilities to be cycling. Right. Now, thank you, Natasha. We will be coming back with questions to you later on. Before we move on to Carolyn and Ellie, we're going to see a little clip that Josh is going to put up of Sophia Hussain, who has been working with Active Oxfordshire to share her experience of the barriers to cycling and how she personally has overcome them. So Josh, can I hand over to you?
Yeah, no problem at all. I'm just going to play a short clip. You may want to just turn your volume up slightly, just because due to my fault on the recording, it's a little bit quiet or muffled in places, but you will be able to hear it if you just nudge your volume up slightly. And I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. And you'll be confronted with my face on the screen at the beginning until I hit play on the clip. Share sound as well. Okay. Here we go. So if you just nudge your sound up a little bit, and I'll make sure I've done the same here. Okay, here we go. It's only a couple of minutes long, but this is Sophia from Cowley. So what challenges do you think families face to cycling?
So I think for us personally, the big challenge for us is that we couldn't actually afford one. I have a car as well, and so the cost of the cycle is quite expensive actually. The only place we knew was Halford. But now, we've come to know of other places that do sell second-hand bikes. And I was always a little bit cautious buying from Gumtree or somewhere along those lines, because are the cycles, are they road safe? Another challenge for me and my family was I was actually really, really scared of cycling on the road. I've got two very energetic children. We've only just recently learned about snaking, but I just had this image of, you know, me and my children all over the road and lots of beeping, and because the roads are actually really, really busy, so that was a challenge for us. I think, I'm not sure about the children, but for me, definitely, I was very fearful riding on the road.
Perfect. And can you tell us about your sort of cycling journey over the last few months?
Yes, I can. Oh, I'm not sure the name of the organisation. I think it's Oxford Hub and Active Oxfordshire. They very kindly gifted us some bikes for myself and my 3 children. And then I also got some cycling lessons from a lovely lady called Jennifer, and that opened up a whole new Oxford to me, actually. I had some cycling lessons with her. It's enabled me to really build up my confidence. The children, we've been cycling very regularly.
What difference has cycling made to you?
Oh gosh, it's made a massive difference. I can't begin to tell you. So lockdown is really beginning to get tough. You know, usually I'm quite a positive, upbeat person, but you know, having the children at home all the time, and just, you know, my younger son, he doesn't like going out for walks. So having the cycles meant that we could cycle together. And there aren't very many activities that you can get a 7 and 8-year-old and 11-year-old all to do. But whenever I mention the cycles, they're more than happy to go out and cycle. It's meant that I can appreciate Oxford, you know, in a different way, and there's something so healing about being in the open, and just being shown those scenic routes has meant that, you know, we've been able to have the healing side of cycling as well. And my children are very, very energetic, and they needed daily doses of being taken outside. So the cycles have been an absolute godsend. And as I mentioned before, you know, my mental health was beginning to decline, if I'm honest with you. Cycling, I've noticed a massive improvement. And also, you know, the children, they'll cycle to school now. Whenever I mention cycling, they're totally up for it. So it's made a huge difference for our family, huge difference. Thank you so much.
So hopefully you managed to pick up some of the key points there from Sophia. She would have loved to have joined us live this afternoon, but quite literally as we speak, she'll be cycling to school to collect her children. So I think that's a good reason as any for her not to be here. So I'm glad she could join us at least on the recorded clip. And I'll pass back over to you, Alison.
Thank you. And that was so inspirational, and the fact that she mentions the healing side of it as well as the joy of it, and you know, almost the fact that cycling is a rite of passage for her children. So wonderful. So we're now going to hear from Carolyn Axtell. Carolyn is, I've got to find my bit of paper, sorry. Carolyn is founder of Joyriders, London CIC, or Community Interest Company rather, which empowers women and families from diverse communities through cycling. She's co-founder of Fatima Elizabeth Madrasa Cycle Club and a freelance consultant in diversity, inclusion and community engagement. And I think you will find her session inspiring. Also a resident of Waltham Forest, of course, where many, many people from Oxford have been over to visit. I think hundreds to visit the low traffic neighbourhoods. So thank you, Carolyn.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for inviting me this afternoon. Yeah, so as Alison said, I'm Carolyn Axtell. I've recently started describing myself as an ecosystem builder, because what I've done in Waltham Forest is effectively sort of transform cycling in terms of increasing the diversity of cycling and introducing hundreds, probably moving into the thousands with the ripple effect of families from different backgrounds into cycling. And the story that Sophia was relating there is very familiar to me. So I don't have a background as a sort of confident cyclist. I actually started cycling. I found it very liberating in terms of helping me to rebuild my health after I had breast cancer a few years ago. And I started cycling to get my kids to school because of the mini Holland measures that were coming in, quite rightly making it more difficult to drive the sort of mile and back to school every day. And I can identify very much with what Sophia was saying about being quite stressful taking 3 kids on your own on the roads to begin with. But I did find it very liberating, very empowering. And I started asking other women why they weren't cycling, because there were very few, even with the measures that were being introduced, and it's now a kind of cycling utopia here in Waltham Forest. Even with that, there were very few women, particularly from Muslim and Black and ethnic minority communities, that were, that were cycling to school. So I started just asking all the women I met why they weren't cycling, and conducting, I suppose, personal research into what those barriers were, and that were preventing them from cycling. And I think both Natasha and Sophia have alluded to many of them there. I think there are also additional barriers for a number of families where they've got children with special needs, and we've been able to successfully engage with those families who told us that they wanted to not just have sort of all ability sessions cycling around the park, but they wanted to actually participate in family rides, which we've been able to do with them. So ultimately I just started organising led rides for women, social bike rides targeting mums during school hours. And because women are like the gateways to the community, it's very successful in terms of then moving on to getting children cycling. I'm just going to see if I can share my screen with you. Let's see if this works. Hang on, that's the wrong one. How do I stop sharing? If I move it on to, can you see that now? No, I don't think. Can you do stop share?
Oh,
because I've got the wrong I've got the wrong thing. Let me try again. It's hang on. Going back to the slides. Sorry guys, just a minute. I clicked on share by, yeah, okay. So let me try again. Right, can you see that
Perfect.
now?
Yeah,
yes,
perfect.
yeah.
And if I move to this second, hang on, I'll actually do. The problem I find is that you've always got the slides moving down the side. Anyway, that doesn't matter too much. Can you guys see that well enough?
Yes, yeah, I can.
So effectively, by organising, so the hook to bring people in was the idea of having social rides. So they were very appealing on a number of different levels. So very much targeting women and stay-at-home mums, because it would enable them to have some time for themselves, you know, sort of break from running around servicing the needs for the rest of their families. And it really just quickly kind of opened the floodgates to this huge suppressed demand. We've got a very high, we've got like 22% Muslim community here, lots of different Black and ethnic minority communities. Many people basically wanted to cycle, but they, you know, they just had all these barriers preventing them. So with the council lending us bikes, that made a huge difference. And I'm not talking about borrowing a bike and taking it home, but starting rides in a park where the bikes are stored, so people can borrow them from for the duration of the ride, which is a really good starting point for people. We had a lot of support from the council. They paid for me and a number of other women to train as cycling instructors. And I saw that we needed, to begin with, I was bringing in women from the wider mainstream cycling community to lead rides, but they didn't reflect the diversity of the participants. So we developed a progression pathway where participants could then train up as ride leaders, which included maintenance training, first aid training, as well as the practical ride leader training, and obviously doing their bikeability level 2 and 3 first to make sure that they were confident enough. So I'm talking about primarily women that weren't confident cyclists to begin with, but we trained them up to be. So all of those women would then act as kind of cycle champions and bring in further, you know, recruit further women from within their communities, and doing a very similar thing with Fatima Elizabeth, the madrasa, which I'm not sure if Josh is going to show those pictures of the rides in due course, but I'll talk the rest of this slide first. So basically, it was having the funding and support of the council plus a good kind of training budget, which meant that we could recruit our own trainees basically through our own personal communities. So very much having that kind of grassroots bottom-up approach, and having those led rides really bridges the gap between cycle training and having the confidence to cycle independently, because I know myself from working as an instructor that many people will say that they've had their level 2 and maybe even their level 3 training, but they're not actually confident to cycle on the roads. So I think this is the key part here. I don't know if you can see my mouse and that highlighting, but the bit that's in bold. So that's the sort of process, conducting the social rides, which, and we always have a nice cafe stop. So, you know, the social aspect is very important. And appealing, and doing that during school hours, that enables women who've got school age children. You can also do it at the weekend, of course, if you've got women that are working during the week. That enables them to build their confidence. We can then signpost them to book training if they need it, and we can also do the reverse. We had lots of women who'd never ridden at all, so as instructors we taught them to cycle, and then we would do very short beginners rides to get them onto the lead rides. So it's a sort of two-way street there. So that helps to then build people's confidence, and through the social rides they gain experience cycling on the roads, and then they're able to book children's, you know, cycling for their own children, either as a family or just for their children, again with bikes provided, because ultimately you've got to be a confident cycler. You've got to be confident enough to take your children out on the road. So if you're not confident, taking all your children out on the road with you is obviously going to be daunting, even if you're talking about using, you know, a child seat or a cargo bike. So after that, we would then have families participating in our organised family rides, which I can talk about in a minute if we've got access to those slides. And that's the process by which people then build up, so they're finally confident enough to take their children on the rides using the routes that they've learned themselves. So it's very much a sort of incremental process. And then we've also got some additional measures such as buddy riding, because one of the barriers that came up was once people booked a bike to hire from the council, which they're able to do for free for 3 weeks, often they weren't confident enough to ride it home from the depot. They'd have to ride them, you know, put it in their car. So we'd have a buddy to ride home with them so that they can then practice in their local park if they're at that sort of entry level. And then there have also been, with Fatima Elizabeth, some targeted projects working with mosques and Islamic supplementary schools, which have been very successful, again as a kind of community building exercise. And I would just say that I think having cycle instructors from in those communities, you know, make really good role models, and they're able to better reach their own communities than anybody else. So even if there is access to cycle training and you tell people about it and improve the promotion of it, if the cycle trainer is you know, a young white male who's always been a very confident cyclist, the training that he provides, although we've all been trained to the same standard to deliver bikeability, may not be culturally sensitive, and many people feel more confident and more comfortable doing cycle training with, you know, with somebody that they know. Are you able to just put those slides up, Josh, or am I running on?
Yeah, sure. No, you've got plenty of time. I can just share screen. I've got the slideshow that you sent me, and if I do anything, it will overwrite your screen sharing if you're happy with that.
Yeah, that's fine.
No problem at all.
That's one of our cycling instructors, Khadija Zaidi. So she's a particularly good role model because she cycles in full Islamic dress. So you should, I believe, be able to see the slideshow here now.
Yeah. Yes, we can.
And do you want me just to scroll through, Carolyn, and you can tell me when to stop?
I'll just talk to each slide and then perhaps
sure.
So this one here, this was actually the last family ride that we did before the lockdown. It was that weekend just before the measures were brought in, which has made it kind of even more special in people's memories. The adapted bike that you can see was borrowed from the council, although the families of children with special needs would still like to have more, I think, more support on that front. The little boy at the front with his mum, Jacob, we've got a lovely case study of him on the Joyriders website. He's the little boy on the autistic spectrum who's really come on in leaps and bounds to the point that they were cycling around central London during the lockdown, which was something they could never have imagined they'd be able to do with him. So when he's on the rides, we tend to put him at the front because he feels more comfortable being at the front of the ride. yeah, so as you can see, it's a very diverse group. This is a ride that we did last summer with some activities at the Walthamstow wetlands. Let's have a look at the next one. Yeah, these are some more from the wetlands ride. I mean, we're very lucky having some nice off-road locations, which does help a lot. I think they're more from the same ride. Yeah, and these are, so this is Salehar, who was one of the first joy riders, and I try to particularly kind of shine a light on women who wear the niqab, the face veil, when it comes to cycling, because it really helps to attract and instill confidence in other women. And there are many non-Muslim women that have said, you know, if she can do it, I can do it. It sort of, it shows really that anybody can cycle. Yeah. And these are some, so this is a ride that we did in partnership with the local madrasa. I think this was last summer or the summer before. That's it. Oh, that's my son. Oh, this was Carry Me bikes that lend out sort of family cycling kits in East London, which is a fantastic project. So people are able to borrow all manner of, you know, like follow me's, cargo bikes and what have you. That makes it more accessible for them. This is another one of our special needs families that came down to see what there was for them in terms of adaptive bikes. And okay, so these are from the sort of legendary ride, the first family ride that we did with Fatima Elizabeth Madrasa in 2017 in August, which was a really interesting experience. We had like 50 people sign up, staff, parents, families, and it was really interesting because the majority of them didn't know that the marshes and the River Lee were just up there, despite having lived, most of them, in Walthamstow, you know, for their whole lives. So it really was a revelation, and most of them didn't really understand to begin with that we were going on a bike ride as opposed to sort of driving to a park with the bikes in the car to just, you know, ride around the park. And it really was a sort of quite transformative experience. And we've now got a huge cycling culture. So the head teacher of that madrasa is now a cycling instructor himself. And I mentioned earlier, we've got the mosque project where he's actually developed a khutbah or sermon that he delivers in the mosques about the Islamic virtues of cycling. And that's particularly good because it kind of pulls away any argument about religious values being incompatible with cycling, and shows that it's actually a cultural rather than a religious issue by having the endorsement of the mosques. And we do training with the children during madrasa hours. That's one that we did, I think, October half term, another ride with the madrasa families. So I think you get the general picture. And I think it's interesting that in Oxford, you've got some similar parallels because you've already got quite a strong cycling culture. It's just a question of reaching out to make sure that it's inclusive for all communities. Right, I think I'll stop now because I've probably talked for too long. Happy to take questions.
So, oh, that was absolutely inspirational. Thank you, Carolyn. I think so much that we need to take away from what you've said and really try and implement here. And I think we're at the beginnings, and it sounds like what Natasha and Ellie and the Oxford Hub are doing with Active Oxfordshire is really going to help make a difference here. And I think we need to learn very much from what you're doing. So can I hand over now to Ellie, who is, she runs the Ready, Set, Go project through the Oxford Hub and is working in East Oxford. And the Active Reach project that Natasha spoke about is part of the Ready, Set, Go project. So Ellie, over to you.
Hello, thank you very much. I'm Ellie, and yeah, I work for the Oxford Hub. My main focus currently is Ready, Set, Go, which has been a little bit spoken about, but it's a campaign which we've set up recently, ensuring that every child can learn to swim and ride a bike, and also encourages families to be on a whole sort of more active together. Due to COVID restrictions, we are focusing on the cycling element first. But yeah, as people have already mentioned, there are various barriers to cycling generally and in Oxford specifically, such as the cost of buying a bike and all the extras that come along with cycling to keep you as safe as possible, including sort of helmets, locks, lights, cost of tuition, and as Natasha mentioned as well, sort of getting from A to B on a safe route as well. There's a few things we've been doing in practice over the last couple of months to tackle these barriers, including the summer school, which was based on a Fit, Fed, Read model, and that was in collaboration with Active Oxfordshire, Youth Ambition, the police, and various other wonderful community partners in Oxford. The purpose of the summer school was to break down the barriers of cycling, as well as food poverty and the reading gap, which is especially important at the moment because of lockdown and the schools being closed for a period of time. So just a little bit of background about the summer school. We ran it Monday to Thursday for 3 weeks, and it was based in Blackbird Leys, so the 3 different schools in Blackbird Leys, Orchard Meadow, Pegasus and Windale had the opportunity to refer children. It was super COVID safe. We stuck to bubbles, different lunch times, temperature checks, etc. And no COVID cases came out of the summer school, which is great. We had a really, really big focus on cycling, which links in really well with our Ready, Set, Go work. We organised Bikeability for the year 5s and 6s and Wheels for All training for the year 4s and 3s. Children who didn't have their own bike to access this training, we actually managed to provide them with one, and they got to take it home at the end as well, which was great, along with helmets, locks and lights. We learn a lot from the summer school about how important accessible cycling is for many people in Oxford. We know that there is sort of not as much cycling happening in certain areas of Oxford than others. So yeah, we started this Ready, Set, Go bike library in Blackbird Leys, which aimed to get more people cycling, meaning that they could save on transport costs, parking costs, and just generally encouraging people to be sort of more active generally. So the process of the bike libraries are, we get lots of donations from residents in Oxford or colleges, and then one of our lovely volunteers goes to collect all the bikes, and we've worked with Broken Spoke and also Tracks. So Tracks actually works to engage learners who struggle with mainstream provision, and they're actually using the money that we are paying to refurbish the bikes to employ some of their students, which is really, really great. Then the bikes will get matched with people who have been referred, so people can self-refer, they can refer friends, family, etc. And then once the bikes are all refurbished, we ran one so far because of COVID, one sort of bike collection. And that was a really, really, really lovely event. And the idea is that the person or people who are referred come to collect their bikes, their locks, their lights and helmets. And once sort of COVID restrictions allow us, we're really planning on using this space to be sort of more focusing on relationship building, getting to know the people who we're sort of giving the bike to, and building a real sense of community, offering it to be sort of a bit more of like a social event, maybe with a cup of tea, and also give them information about how they can access other Oxford Hub programmes and how they can just be a part of those generally, as well as meeting lots of new people. So the bike tuition comes along with the bike offer as well. So if people need sort of extra tuition, we're putting them in touch with Jennifer and her team from Wheels for All, who are like providing tuition, and off the back of this they've actually sort of arranged, which has been mentioned, but some sort of small group cycles, which has been really nice for all learners, and also it gives them a space as well to ask for advice on safe cycling routes, say from their home to their workplace and stuff like that, which is yeah, it's really great. And then when a person who is referred, so if a child sort of grows out of their bike, the idea is with the bike library that they can sort of give their bike back, and then we'll match them with a new bike. So it's just continually encouraging them to cycle. but we're really working towards more of like a whole family approach. So we're really keen to get the whole family active together, because it's so important for people's mental health and well-being, especially in such tricky times at the moment. A really good example of this is there was a family whose smallest child was too young to ride a bike, so we actually bought a bike seat with them and arranged one of the sort of a local mechanic in their area who volunteers with us to sort of fix it onto their bike nice and safely, because that would have been a big barrier for the whole family to cycle together. But yeah, all of this is really new stuff, and we're working, like, we're continually learning along the way, trying to tackle all the different barriers the community comes across in relation to cycling, and we hope to continue lots of learning from the residents, receiving bikes, and really focus on that sense of community through the Ready Set Go programme, and then hopefully take our learnings and expand it in other areas in Oxford as well. So yeah, that's all from me.
So thank you, Ellie. That was lovely and really exciting. And as you say, it feels very new for Oxford, doesn't it? And we've got a long, we've started. And I was remembering, and I said to Josh, I feel very embarrassed that Cyclox ran a conference last year, called Like Riding a Bike, and we didn't include Active Oxfordshire. And actually the whole leadership is now coming from Active Oxfordshire to get people cycling. Josh, at some stage it would be useful to hear about the cycling and walking activation plan as well.
Okay. Yeah, no, I've got there's a couple of questions in the chat. If I quickly whistle through a quick bit on the local cycling and walking activation plan, and then shall I reel off some questions then?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, cool, no problem at all. So the local cycling and walking activation plan is a series of complementary measures that are intended to sit alongside the more infrastructural measures. And I guess that comes out of a fear that if we simply just improve infrastructure, there's a risk there that actually that will widen health inequalities, because it might only be used by people who already cycle extensively. They just might be doing that in a more comfortable way. So what we're trying to do alongside that, we think it has to be both infrastructure and community activation, is work with all the partners, all the strengths, all the assets that are in the various communities across the city and the county, and come up with a series of activation measures that support the infrastructure. So if we get to a situation where there's improved cycling infrastructure, there's also a cohort of new people who have recently become cyclists, who want to travel in a different way, who want to move around in a different way, and a different recreational activity. And we think they go hand in hand, and that's why the local activation plan is intended to complement anything that comes in terms of infrastructure and that sort of thing. So it's really exciting to hear the work that Natasha's doing, that Ellie's doing, and Carolyn is, I think, a year or two ahead of us in terms of where we're trying to get to. So that's great to kind of have that in our mind as well, because I think some of those things that have already going really, really well over there would be the absolute utopia for us to be getting to, I think. There's a couple of questions in the chat. So there was one from Natasha, which was for Carolyn. So Natasha, if I could just come to you and I'll let you go for it, and then Carolyn can answer that. And then I'll come to Dan next as well, and then I'll work my way through. But please do feel free to pop any questions in the chat.
Hi, Carolyn. My question was, just find it again. I wanted to know which was the best marketing methods that you used to try and reach the ladies.
You're muted, Carolyn.
Sorry about that. Yeah, WhatsApp, I was saying, was really key, I think, to the initial success of this work, because lots of people aren't on Facebook. WhatsApp is used by people who don't engage that much with other social media, and even lots of women from migrant communities who've got English as a second language. But ultimately, a lot of it was just face-to-face as well, just sort of face-to-face outreach, because it started at a grassroots level. But I think because photographs are so powerful, once people see those photographs being shared. I mean, I once had a woman come all the way from Hammersmith and Fulham, which is the other side of London, for some training, when she could have booked cycle training in her borough, but because she could see that it was sort of culturally appropriate, she felt more comfortable, basically, to come and have a lesson, you know, with a female Muslim instructor. But yeah, WhatsApp, even these days, a lot of people seem to really like WhatsApp.
Yep. It's good, thank you. It's very inspiring, the images, pictures. So,
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think this one, I'll come to Dan next. He had a question which I think is directed for you as well, Carolyn. So I'll let Dan, if you're happy to unmute and go for it, I'll let you read it out yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Carolyn, it's all very impressive. I'm interested to know if you've got any measures of how well you're doing in Waltham Forest compared with the boroughs next to you, which are a bit less advanced when it comes to bikes. I'm really trying to explore whether it's you and your outreach or infrastructure or just that more people cycle in Waltham Forest anyway.
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually, and it would be great if there was a way of sort of pinpointing that data. I mean, because this started out as kind of like very kind of grassroots work on a voluntary basis, we didn't have the sort of capacity or the resources to do as effective sort of data capture as we would have liked, although that's improved more recently, certainly with Joyriders. I keep saying me, I don't actually work for Joyriders anymore. I'm actually now Car Free London campaigner for an environmental organisation, but I've still got links with Joyriders and a lot of these other projects. What I would say is that having with the infrastructure, you get your low-hanging fruit, because it's certainly making it much easier for people to cycle, and it has massively contributed to the success of this work. So it's a kind of perfect storm in a way, like having all the sort of planets in alignment. So having, you know, Waltham Forest as a sort of flagship borough with all of that investment in the complementary measures has certainly helped a lot. But when we started doing this work, Mini Holland, hadn't really gone that far. It was still early days, but we've also got an area where we've got lots of green spaces that are connected, like the Lee Valley and the marshes and the Olympic Park. So you can do some nice off-road rides while to build people's confidence before you progress to the on-road rides. And I would also say that some of these projects, like Cycle Sisters, has now expanded, which is a specifically Muslim women's cycle group that Joyriders has worked in partnership with. That's now expanded into some other boroughs, and you can see. I mean, when I first started doing this work, you would sort of turn your head if you saw a woman wearing hijab cycling, or maybe even like a black person on a bike. It was a bit like something noticeable. But while I've been standing here talking to you guys, there's been numerous people of different backgrounds just cycling past my window. So it's really visible. You know, I passed a group the other day where there was like 25 middle-aged black men going off on a ride. And I'm not talking about in lycra, I'm talking about in like kind of anoraks and like jogging bottoms, and, you know, so not sort of sport cycling. So sorry, that's probably going off on a bit of a tangent. I think the outreach is really key for reaching, because all the infrastructure is great, but for people that have never ridden a bike and for whom it just seems really overwhelming, they really need a lot more support and nurture. And I think there are other barriers that we didn't even cover, like women's really low level of confidence. Many women, the lack of confidence in their ability to learn a new skill. You know, some of them are really absolutely terrified, even though they really want to cycle. And that might be something that it's hard for some people to relate to. But I mean, if I was, you know, trying to reach out to more diverse communities in Oxfordshire, I would say encourage women like Natasha and Sophia. Those are the women that, you know, it would be great to train them up as ride leaders, as cycling instructors, because they'll be able to reach out and recruit and train all the other women within their communities. And women are the gateways to the communities. It's still very well, you know, my experience working as an instructor, you train children all the time and you say to them, will you be able to cycle after this? Do your parents cycle? They say, no, I haven't got a bike. No, my mum and dad don't ride, you know, and it's not going to go anywhere. So the work that Oxford Hub are doing that's more family specific, I think will be more valuable. Or I probably shouldn't say more valuable, because obviously bikeability is also valuable. But I think it's, yeah, it's really important to work with families as well at a community level.
Thanks, Carolyn. There was a question I just sort of might jump in quickly whilst I'm collating the other questions that are coming in the chat. You made it sound like the demand was always there, almost, and it was just putting the right things in place for that demand to come forward. I think there's sometimes an assumption that people who are not cycling don't want to, but it makes it sound like once you can create the right environment, that actually the demand had always been there, we just didn't know about it. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, I think so. It's I suppose it's like there are so many other kind of societal barriers there, and when communities are described as hard to reach, you know, it's actually quite patronising term in some ways. It really depends who it is that's trying to reach them and why. And actually suppressed, I think it's called, is it called suppressed or latent demand? It's a sort of transport planning term that I learned, but it wasn't that people actively had chosen not to cycle. It's just that it never occurred to them that even with all of this infrastructure building, that it was a possibility for them, because they just didn't, you know, they didn't know where to start.
That's great. And there's a question from Sam from Broken Spoke, who I spotted was actually working on a bike in the workshop as we were going through, which is fantastic. Sam, can I come to you, if you wouldn't mind reading out your question for Carolyn, I believe.
Sure, yeah. Sorry, I was in the background just fixing a bike because I'm trying to multitask, and my lights broke on the way into work. So, Carolyn, thanks for the stuff you've been talking about. Like Alison said, very inspiring. I was curious, especially from Broken Spoke's perspective, because we try to employ cycling instructors in the work that we do as a bikeability provider here in Oxford, and I wonder how much employment the new instructors that you've seen created within those communities, how much employment they've actually then gone on to have, like how much of I guess what kind of an environment there is around in those neighbourhoods to actually support those people into those new jobs. I found that specifically during COVID, the role of a cycling instructor has become yet even more precarious. And before then it was, you know, like a 0 hours contract, self-employed, all quite difficult. So I just wondered if there's anything you could speak to about that kind of stuff. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I should just say that one of my favourite events that I attended during lockdown was a Broken Spoke event with Emily Chappell and Jules Walker, which was really fantastic and really beautifully presented. Yeah, really lovely intimate event, even with 100 people on it. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. So yeah, I mean, Sam's absolutely right. Obviously at the moment it's a difficult environment for instructors, and actually in London we've now got a union for cycling instructors, and the situation is particularly precarious because the funding was coming through Transport for London. So obviously that's, you know, there've been massive sort of budget cuts for cycle training, but that's not you know, because of COVID, but that's obviously not so relevant for you guys. But in the past it's worked really well because we've had very generous cycle training budgets in those mini Holland boroughs, so people have basically been able to have pretty much as many lessons as they wanted. So there are so many co-benefits there to doing this kind of community level work, because obviously you've got the environmental outcomes, but also all the sort of personal, the social outcomes. We've had some really good outcomes around social integration, and the economic outcomes, because for stay-at-home mums, if you can help them to develop their confidence, it's like a perfect sort of way of re-entering the workplace, you know, because you can do training in schools while your children are at school. So we've had generous budgets in the past for one-to-one training, but I know it's not the same in all boroughs. I know in some boroughs people are only allowed 1 or 2 lessons, which is obviously not enough for beginners. Yeah, it's a problem. Even in Waltham Forest, the budgets have been cut to 1/6 of what they were. Yeah.
Thanks, Carolyn.
I hope that answers your question. I mean, if you had some, I mean, looking at Broken Spoke, it looks a bit like London Bike Kitchen. You've obviously engaged really well with, you've got a lot of the sort of gender stuff. You've got, you know, the sort of women and gender variant nights, which are probably really reaching out and bringing more women in. But I wondered how much diversity you've got within that in terms of reaching out to women from different backgrounds. So it all comes down to role models, I think, doesn't it? If you had someone like Natasha or Sophia there that was able to deliver the training, they could probably bring, as long as the funding is there to pay for the training, you could probably, you know, recruit loads of prospective trainees.
Yeah, that's a tricky thing for us, is trying to actually provide consistent work for instructors, and we have had instructors kind of come and go with Broken Spoke. So currently got 2 instructors who are on furlough as of a couple of weeks ago, because there's no point in us trying to run any cycle training when people aren't leaving the house, and they've had a very difficult year. But they also like it's something that we've always found there's not enough resources to support us nurturing instructors and nurturing people into that kind of role of being a cycling mentor effectively in a community. Like there's a lot of willing and a lot of like enthusiasm and excitement in the organisation, but we don't have those resources within the organisation to go out there into communities where people don't think about cycling and don't think cycling is for them. And so it's great to see the work that's happening with Oxford Hub and Active Oxfordshire, but I also wonder about, you know, being able to create long-term and lasting change where people are actually employed and paid for the time that they're putting in to be those kind of figures in the centre of community that can really create that kind of change. So I don't think the cycling instructor qualification in Oxford is a strong enough thing to provide people with that kind of kind of payback for the time they put in. Don't know what the answer is though, so I'll put myself on mute. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's a whole conversation within itself. I mean, I would say that women that are sort of returning to the workplace are often able to, they're not maybe trying to sort of make a living and support their whole family. So it's, I'm not trying to say it's pocket money or anything like that, but they might be in a position where they can do like little bits of training. But I absolutely understand what you mean about, you know, things need to be resourced properly, because people reach a point where they can only do so much volunteering, you know, and they do need to pay their bills. So it sounds as if, I don't know what the resourcing is for cycle training budgets, but if at the moment there's only adult training available that people have to pay for, then obviously that's a barrier. But if the activation fund is going to enable free training for adults, then as long as you can do the outreach into those communities, then you'll be able to get a lot more people on bikes. It sounds like there's loads of scope for partnership between Broken Spoke and Oxford Hub and the other community projects.
Absolutely. There's a question that's come in, which I think is probably for Ellie, I reckon will be best placed. Vicky, would you mind just, if you're happy, just to pop yourself off mute and your question? And I think Ellie would probably be best placed, because I think it's specific to the bike libraries.
Oh, hi, yes, my name is Vicky Aston. I work for the South Oxfordshire and the Vale Whitehorse District Councils, and prior to working there I worked at Sport England, so I really understand the messages you've been bringing up about activation, and I found it really exciting to hear the experiences you've shared. Sorry, can you hear me? Sure. Great. My question was just, can you tell me more about the physical facilities supporting the initiatives? For example, who runs the bike libraries? Are they part of existing buildings? Who manages them and funds them or maintains them? And, you know, are they something that the council supported? Or yeah, just some more information would be really great. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so currently I kind of lead. Can you hear me? Yeah. Currently I kind of lead on that. So for example, if someone outgrows their bike, they contact me, and then I'll make sure that we match them with a new bike that sort of fits them, and then we'll take the bike that they have and we will refurbish it, and then we'll sort of, you know, it sort of goes on like that. We have been doing the bike libraries at Orchard Meadow at the moment, which is a primary school in Blackbird Leys, just because it's really sort of within the community, so it's really accessible for people to come and collect their bikes. And at the moment Natasha is currently working on like finding a place that we can store bikes, so say we have too many bikes refurbished for how many matches, that we can then sort of store the bikes there just while we get more referrals and things like that. So yeah. Did you want sort of anything else added to that?
No, that's, thank you. That's just a really interesting example, and shows you like working with schools as well. And I wonder if what the county council might be able to contribute. I don't know. It's interesting. Just interested in how it can be, how the infrastructure can sort of be delivered.
I'd love to be in a situation the idea would be a situation in the long term. I've got a wacky idea that the actual library, you can go and get a book and you can also go and get a bike, but that's maybe one of my harebrained ideas than anything more formal than that. But at the moment, Ellie's sort of running it remotely and so on.
Okay, thank you.
Listen, I think that's all the questions from the chat, unless I've missed anything. So if I hand back over to you, we're running almost perfectly to time. So this is very good. I'll hand over to you.
So wonderful, thank you, and thank you all for great questions. And before we finish, well, one thing I do want to ask Carolyn, you can hear me, is how infrastructure and the softer measures kind of intertwine, because clearly Waltham Forest has got that huge advantage. We are at the point of just getting some low traffic neighbourhoods, hooray, through the Emergency Active Travel Fund. And I think that might be a huge stimulus, and they're all in East Oxford. So the, you know, the Ready, Set, Go will be kind of ready and primed. And I just saw today actually that there's also a consultation out on lots of cycle parking in East Oxford. But it was really you know, how they go hand in hand, the infrastructure and the softer measures that you are, the activation as it's called, that you're involved in.
Yeah, again, it's a really interesting area, which again is almost like a whole another session in itself, because we had the interesting sort of dichotomy here where the Muslim community were very vocal in terms of their opposition to the Mini Holland project, and it's actually one of the mosques that was at the centre of kind of leading that opposition, which is now delivering the cycling projects that I was talking about earlier with the madrasa. I do think the more work you can do to sort of prime the community and build their skills before bringing in the infrastructure changes, the better, because we certainly had here a perception that people, like I was saying to you on that call we had the other day, people felt that something was being imposed on them that they would never be able to use because it was for, you know, the cyclists, and all of this work is being done for the cyclists because they hadn't seen themselves as, you know, potentially being part of that group. So we did have already family social rides that existed before we started doing this work, but they weren't very inclusive because they started in the affluent area. People couldn't get, you had to have your own bike to participate, and ultimately there wasn't that social identification there, because a bike ride is a social event and you're probably not going to go along if there's nobody there that you know, or that looks like you, and nobody sort of reaching out to you. So I don't know if that really answers your question. I mean, obviously these low traffic neighbourhoods will be brought in a lot more quickly, and there may well be all of that sort of backlash. No,
I think the key message that you've given is start now, but to get the community primed. We're running out of time. I would like, it's been a brilliant session, and as Josh says, maybe we need to repeat it, but it was just to give Natasha, Ellie and Carolyn the last words. So just what will you advise all of us in getting people cycling and overcoming the barriers and finding the solutions? Ellie, I'll start with you.
I guess to spread the word about bike donations. If anybody knows anyone who can donate bikes in the local area, definitely let us know, because we want to just reach as many people as possible, and just talk about all the positive things that cycling can bring, really.
Thank you. Natasha?
The same as what Ellie said, but also I try and encourage people to cycle rather than walk, and highlights the physical aspects of, like, healthy aspects of it. So I think GPs and things could link in with the cycling. So if you're obese or diabetic, you might not be able to walk very far, but you can cycle, which is better to keep the legs moving, heart going. And if you see somebody walking around, like Ellie said, if you've got a bike in the garden, if they don't want it, then, you know, knock on the door, say, do you mind if we have it? Everything helps. And over to Josh.
Thank you, Natasha. And Carolyn?
Yeah, I would just say even at the moment, I don't know, it's national, isn't it, this thing where you can only go out with one other person. Find somebody else to go out and go on a ride with, and I would say whoever's holding the purse strings, you know, or can access funding, have a look at recruiting those community champions, even if they're not particularly confident cyclists at the moment. Train them up, and they can reach into the communities for you, but training as an instructor is really, you know, expensive, so having a subsidy for that would make it a lot more accessible. And I would say get some really good professional pictures when you've got some rides, when you're able to do rides again in larger numbers. Get some really good professional pictures, make sure that they reflect the communities that you want to reach, so that there's good diversity of representation, and put that on all of your policy documents and your leaflets so that people can see themselves represented, because I think it will really make a big difference.
Three really important messages from our speakers. So thank you all hugely, and thanks to Josh and Active Oxfordshire for putting this on and hosting it. I think it's been a wonderful session, and I'll say goodbye. Josh, is there anything more you want to say before we close?
Just to say thank you for everyone for joining us, and I think as Natasha said in the chat, we might need 2 hours next time because there's so much. I've got reams and reams of notes here that I'll look to catch up with Natasha and Ellie next week and see what we can do with some of the wisdom we've just heard. So thanks very much, everybody, and have a good rest of the day. And thank you to Alison for doing such a good job keeping us all in order this afternoon.